The temperate forests and woodlands of the Northern Hemisphere are host to an abundance of readily available flammable tinders. You just need to know where to look, what to look for, and how to use what you find. Well, this video will cover those bases, so here are 10 natural fire starting materials that you can use in combination with a Ferrocerium Rod to start a fire. First up, Western Red Cedar Bark. The Western Red Cedar tree is a coniferous tree with a distinctive orange tinted bark, flat-scaled sprays of fern-like evergreen leaves and deeply crimson branches. Easily identifiable, the bark of this tree, which is shaggy, fluffy, fibrous and rough in texture, is an easily gatherable natural tinder. Just grab a rock or the back of your knife and scrape away against the bark to accumulate a fluffy bundle of bark fibres. Take your bundle of fibres back to camp and compress the fluffy mass into a densely packed bundle, with a small dip in the centre to accommodate your ferro rod and the eventual ember. And you're ready to go. Whip out your Ferrocerium Rod and unleash a steady but constant shower of sparks into the belly of the bundle. All it takes is for a few fibres to catch and the rest will shortly follow. Breathe into those initial smouldering fibres to spread the ember until eventually those embers will be large enough so that the rest of the bundle can combust into flames. Easy life. Now for the next tinder on the list, birch bark. The birch tree. With brilliant white bark and dark horizontal fissures, it is as eye-catching as it is commonplace. The bark of this tree is highly flammable and water resistant, so it's a useful tinder even in wet weather conditions. It will take a spark from a Ferrocerium Rod, providing that the bark has been processed down fine enough. So begin by gliding your knife down the length of the trunk and tearing off those sheets of bark, favouring the dead and fallen birch trees as they're much easier to tear. And once you've got a nice few sheets of bark, peel them down into thin strips. Go one step further by then wrapping them around your finger and holding them in place for a few moments. This allows the strips to retain a curl, which makes it easier for them to catch a spark. Perfect. Now take your bundle of small curls and place them upon your fire lay. Grab your Ferrocerium Rod and scrape the sparks into the heart of the bundle. It should only take a few moments before the flammable resins and oils contained within the birch bark conflagrate, and thus we have flame. Nice. But if that don't tickle your fancy, then for an alternative method of using birch bark, try birch dust. Simply take a sheet of birch bark in your knife and while applying light pressure, scrape your knife against the surface of the bark. Scrape away until you start to reveal the inner bark's basal orange colour, and after a few short minutes you should have a fine collection of flammable birch powder. But remain vigilant. Protect the birch dust while you prepare yourself. The slightest gust of wind may blow it away, but once safe in the knowledge that all of your efforts will not be made in vain, reintroduce your dust into the world, and into the business end of your ferro rod. Unleash a flurry of sparks and it shan't be long until they combust into flame. And this initial small flame will go on to propagate the combustion of the sheet of bark that it lays upon. Easy game, easy life. The coal fungus. Commonly referred to as cramp balls or King Alfred's cakes, these semi-spherical flammable fungi may be found dwelling upon the many dead fallen logs and tree stumps that litter the forest floor. With a tough matte black exterior shell, they resemble lumps of charcoal in both appearance and composition. This fungus has the ability to effortlessly catch and hold a spark to form an ember. How so? Well, begin by chopping the fungus in two to reveal its core, a core that will typically be host to a few onion-esque concentric layers. These core concentric rings are growth rings, similar to what you would find upon a felled tree. Each layer represents a new season of growth, and they are the incendiary portions of the fungus. So to use this fungus as a tinder, proceed by chopping it again on the other side, so that it may lay flat and stable upon the surface. Then, once level, delicately place your Ferrocerium Rod onto the fungus and strike your sparks downwards into its core. After a few sparks, the core should begin to glow. Gently blow upon those glowing embers to spread it onwards throughout the rest of the body. Allow the ember to completely consume the body. And now, you're ready to move on to the final stage, the ember nest. If you haven't done so already, then grab a few handfuls of dead dry grass. Place your smouldering ember into the centre of the grass bundle and blow. The intense heat from the bellowed ember will bring the bundle of dried grass up to its ignition temperature, and lo and behold, we have fire from the coal fungus. Done. Now here's an additional fun fact. The smouldering embers of the coal fungus were historically used by nomadic tribesmen to transport their fire between camps, because if left unbellowed, then the coal fungus can smoulder for a considerable length of time, ready to be blown into flame upon arrival at their new destination. Pine cones. Beneath the pine tree, or any coniferous tree for that matter, are cones. Flammable? Indeed. They contain traces of all the flammable oils and resins that pine trees are renowned for, but they first must be broken down, so break up them cones by crushing them in your hands, while every so often scooping away the large elements, leaving behind only the fine dust and small fragments. Now take your Ferrocerium Rod and bathe the fine matter in sparks. Be persistent, be patient, and they will take a spark and smoulder into flame. The flame can be very difficult to see, it is tenuous, but it is there. And as such, this is a method that requires some tender care and close focus. But while you're out and about collecting pine cones, be mindful of pine resin. Search around the trunks of pine trees and you may find a gooey yellow substance excreting from the bark. This is pine resin, a hydrocarbon fuel source. These clumps of matter are Mother Nature's hexamine fuel tablets. Not a tinder per se, as it will not generally take a spark, but it will suffice as a burnable fuel for your fire, once the initial flames have been established. For example, this can build up the small flame given off by the burning pine cone, so it's worthy of an honourable mention. Throw it on the fire, sit back and enjoy the scent, for it is most pleasant. Tinder fungus, a common name given to a wide variety of fungal species. These distinctive parasitic bracket fungi can be found growing out of dead or alive birch trees, beech trees and the bases of oak trees. They vary in colour from white to brown to red, but the common feature that all variants share is directly underneath the outer shell is a cinnamon coloured thick spongy fibrous core. This is the part of the fungus that you'd want to utilise in fire making, so cut yourself off a nice substantial segment and check to see if you've got the right stuff. Upon a squeeze it should bounce back, spongy yet firm, and upon the soft glide of a finger it should be soft like felt. If it meets those requirements then you've got the right stuff, so take your ferro rod and shove it into the block. Scrape vigorously and it shan't be long until an ember forms. Pro tip, due to the composition of tinder fungus, these embers can smoulder for a significant amount of time, so they're useful as a portable ember while travelling from A to B. But if you want a fire right now, then blow upon the ember to spread it, and once you're satisfied with the size, whack it in a bundle of dead grass and blow. Easy. Fireweed. An inhabitant of open grasslands and spacious forest clearings, fireweed is a plant that can grow upwards to heights of 8 feet tall. With long, slender, narrow leaves and purple flowers, this plant, through late summer and autumn, will produce a seed that's fluffy and cotton-like in both texture and property, a readily combustible tinder. But what makes this plant so useful is that much of the seed will remain with the plant throughout winter, a time where resources are very scarce. Just glide your fingers through the length of the stem to gather the seed bundle. Process it down further by vigorously rubbing it in between your hands, and you've got yourself a densely packed fibrous tinder bundle. Take it back to your favourite tree stump and throw a couple sparks at it. It will instantly combust into flame, and will burn for a considerable amount of time depending on how densely you've packed the bundle. The denser you pack it, the slower it will burn. And in similar vein, thistle seed. From as early as late spring, the unopened buds of these prickly thistles can be pried open to reveal their immature, yet still flammable seed. Or you may catch them after they've erupted into fluff, so with the same principles as shown before, gather the bundle, pack it tight, give it a spark, and you'll have a slow burning wick to serve as the foundry for your fire. Easy peasy. Punkwood, found amongst the forest floor or long dead half-standing trees, is punkwood, a term used to describe rotten wood that has decayed to the point where it no longer contains any structural integrity. As such, being incredibly weak and brittle, drier specimens of punkwood will disintegrate into dust upon a light crushing in the hands, and it is this inherent weakness that makes punkwood very susceptible to a hot shower of sparks. So break yourself off a piece, delicately apply the ferro rod on top, and scrape. The sparks will catch, so breathe and bellow that small ember to spread it around. And voila! Your piece of punkwood is now ready to be placed into a nice dry bundle of dead grass to be blown into glorious flame. Wood shavings. If your knife is sharp enough or your gear quirky enough, you can shave off super thin wispy strips of wood from ordinary sticks and branches. Incredibly useful in instances where dry tinders are hard to find, as this allows you to access the dry inner heartwood. Place your ferro rod underneath the coals and scrape those sparks into the bundle. Be mindful that it can take a while to ignite these pure wood shavings. They are stubborn. It does require some vigour, but don't let up and the stars will align for you eventually. Perfect. And last but not least, plain Jane old dead grass. While typically used to nurse ember into flame, it can stand alone as its own base flame source. It may take years of life off your Ferrocerium Rod, but as long as you can continuously pump in the heat faster than the grass can dissipate it, then the heat will build and build until eventually it will combust into flames. And that is a rather simple way of doing things. And that concludes the 10 natural tinders that you can use to make a fire. Peace!